Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to June on the Range 2024. Great BookTube event created by Michael K. Vaughan, where we read Westerns in the month of June. I look forward to this all year long. I actually prepare for it all year long by buying any cheap little 25-cent paperbacks that I find and not reading them. Which I ordinarily don't do. I buy a lot of books, a lot of secondhand books at the Brattle Bookshop. I plow through them. I don't believe in throwing books on the shelf and leaving them there. I tend to plow through them really quickly. But not Westerns. I chuck those on a pile and wait until June, because I don't read Westerns at any other time. So I've been doing that. I've been reading Westerns in June. And I just chuck a book on the pile for the reading at night. So all day long as I'm puttering around here without pants on, and as I'm walking the bean with pants on, I will be thinking, okay, what are your night's reading going to be? The book mail, is often determinative of that. But lots of other stuff too. What are you in the mood for? What do you feel like reading? And I read another one of those old paperbacks that I got. I don't have the paperback here. I just have something on the iPad because I'm sitting. I don't want to get up and get a picture of it. But I read another 1950s Western, which I hauled on this channel from the Brattle months ago. Last year, in fact, I think, is when I got this. It's by Richard Poole. I have no idea who Richard Poole is. I don't usually research these Western authors. I just assume that the name on the cover is a pseudonym and that the author wrote hundreds of books. Now, yesterday I did a book called Border Fever, by C. William Harrison. I did not look up C. William Harrison, but I got the impression of the book from the book that he probably churned these things out. And in the video I said that I thought he'd probably written a couple of hundred books. One of you left a comment saying that, according to Wikipedia, he wrote 1,200 books. Now, I have not gone to Wikipedia and looked him up, but I absolutely do not believe that. Surely no human on earth has written 1,200 books. But I'm sure he wrote a lot, but Wikipedia probably has that wrong. And Richard Poole, for all I know, could be the same thing. This is just another 25-cent paperback Western. This is West of Devil's Canyon. With this great cover here. I showed you the paperback of this when I got it. I don't want to block the bean, do I? And it's a quick thing. These are meant to be read in one commute, maybe two, a day's commute back and forth to the city. It's an unusual Western in some ways. The main character, Phil Ward, is not really a gunfighter. He's not a sheriff. He's not anything like that. He's a businessman. With the Western Pacific Railroad, he and a friend of his, Hal Agren, Agren. That's Halagren. You can do the acrostics on that yourself and guess a major plot point in this book. He and Hal are hoping, when the book begins, they are hoping to get contracts with West Pacific Railroad. Hal wants to supply them with timber, because in this part of Arizona, Hal has property in the timberlands, so he has more than enough wood to supply them for railroad ties and whatnot, buildings all along the way. And Phil wants to supply them not only with construction, he would like a construction job, a lucrative construction contract with Western Pacific, but also with cattle. So they've got proposals before Western Pacific. And when the book begins, they're getting ready to go out in the town. They're in a town. They're going out to go and meet with the Western Pacific representatives and find out if they won the contracts. And they get there and find all sorts of other people who have also put in contracts, including a very obvious bad guy named Milt Reiger, who doesn't get the contract and is very angry with it, very angry about that. It turns out that Phil and Hal do get the contracts, and they're in business to run a line of the Pacific Western Railroad through the timberlands, through across an area called Devil's Canyon, and eventually straight to the Colorado River. So it could be very, very lucrative for them. And they get about business. They get about doing this. They're both level-headed men. They're both young. Phil is a dreamboat. The book goes on and on about how gorgeous he is, but it doesn't actually use the word gorgeous, but he is described at length as statuesque. And the two of them get about business and realize right away that gradually they realize, by about a third of the way through the book, they realize there's a problem. And that is that an encampment has grown up around their works. An end of trail encampment doesn't even have a name. It's not a town in the sense that it has a name or any kind of power structure, but it does have buildings, and it does have a few businesses, gambling halls, and especially cribs. Buildings for prostitution. They're dens of iniquity designed to utterly destroy the workers that Phil and Hal hire with rot-gut whiskey or prostitution or gambling, to utterly destroy them. So that they're no good for the team. So they're no good filling the contracts here that are necessary. These are contracts that need to be fulfilled. And Hal doesn't seem all that worried about it. Phil isn't all that worried about it when it's just a question of morals. But it starts to look like somebody at End of Trail is also encouraging the men to dog it at work. To work slower and poorer. To show up late. To quarrel with their bosses. And the more Phil sees of that, the more he realizes, not only do I not like this, but also this is going to hurt my business. This is actually going to kill my business. I'm not going to be able to fulfill my contract, which would allow Western Pacific not only to revoke my contract, but to sue me. So there's a lot of business aspects going through this book. Although not all. Richard Poole, whoever he is, has the Western writer's knack for dropping heavy-handed hints. At the very beginning of the book, Phil is thinking about Hal, how he likes Hal, but isn't it odd that they both come from the same little town nearby, and yet Phil doesn't remember him being around. Of course, Phil was busy with his own herd up in the foothills. It's possible he could have missed Hal. Any seasoned reader of Western novels is reading that and thinking, uh-oh, this isn't good. Hal might not be good. Even if you don't do the acrostic on his name, Hal might not be good. And also we're told that Hal has very pretty, polished gun set. Nothing's supposed to be polished in a Western. Anything that is finished or polished in a Western is automatically suspect. Automatically potential to be a villain. Foul-mouthed guys, sure. The guys that are rude to women, sure. Savage to women, sure. But especially polish. Anybody that seems charismatic, sure of themselves, outgoing, extroverts, in other words, have targets painted on their backs in old Westerns. And Hal is a big extrovert. And eventually, about the halfway point of the book, actually I should pick up the paperback and read you a bit. About the halfway point of the book, Phil decides there's only one way to fix this problem. And it's all or nothing. Phil is a very all or nothing guy. But you don't think, as a reader, because the first half of the book is so buttoned down with questions of contracts and raw supplies and daily work quotas, you don't expect his solution when he comes to it. And that solution is to destroy the End of Trail encampment. Not to go in and get rid of a few bad apples, but to simply destroy the whole thing. Raze it to the ground. One of his most trusted foremen is a guy named Tim, a rabble-rousing Irishman who loves a good scrap and very much he's startled by Phil's all-or-nothing attitude, but he very much likes it, although he offers a word of caution. At one point, he says, well, there'll be plenty of people there who are innocent. Phil doesn't care. I want it gone. I want this whole thing gone. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to negotiate with it. I want my men back on the right track doing good work, sober, and I want this End of Trail business gone. I don't care how many powerful people are involved in it. Ryger, for instance, Milt Ryger, is very much an enemy that he has to deal with. There's one other guy who's very much an enemy he has to deal with. And of course there's a lady. Carol is her name this time around. She's kind of sweet on Phil, as anybody would be. No one else in the book gets the kind of physical description that this guy does. He has rippling muscles, gigantic pillowy pecs, lovely jawline. I was in love with him myself. Carol is sweet on him. He's got one thing in mind, though, and it's to just extirpate End of Trail. And get his men back on the straight and narrow, even if he has to... Actually, let me read this to you. Even if he has to... this is the paperback. Even if he has to ball them out in the process, and he does. he says, he calls all of them together, all these surly hands together. They're not happy with what he's done. He says, "You've seen what happened to End of Track. That's the end of it, as far as I'm concerned." A low growl swept through the crowd, and Phil raised his hands for silence. "There will be one or two saloons, but I'll decide who will run them and how long they stay open. But I didn't call you out to tell you this." He paused, letting them wonder what would come next. He saw several of them glance toward the Flying W men, that's his ranch, who ringed the group, sitting their horses silent and threatening. His Flying W men on their horses with their black coats are amazing visual motif that runs throughout the book. Before they destroy End of Track, they walk their horses. They just ride through the town. And Phil tells his men, "Don't say anything to anyone. Don't make eye contact with anyone. Just examine the lay of the land. We're going to ride right down the main thoroughfare from one end of Track to the other. They can't stop us. It's not illegal. They don't know who we are. We're reconnoitering, and then when we're done, we're going to turn around, come back, and use that information to destroy the place." And it's a neat moment. And here his men are ringing these workers so that he's not in any danger. They could all be shot down. "I'm through playing," Phil said suddenly. "You get good wages, quarters, and food. But someone in End of Track had you slow down, made you discontented. Well, that's over. There'll be no more free rotgut and twisted talk. There'll be no more drunken riots. If you have a hangover, you'd better not let it interfere with your work. You'll be fired. I pay as good or better than any other contractor, and every man-jack of you knows it. All right, you know where I stand and what's expected of you. If anyone doesn't like the terms, he can draw his pay now. The rest of you can get back to work." That's the attitude that he takes here, is that he's just going to clear out the problem. And it does work. You think that it's anticlimactic because it works right. It works in the middle of the book. It's not a long book. It's like 120 pages long. It doesn't take long to get through this thing. But there is fallout, of course. Because, for instance, Milt Reiger and his men, the other bad guys that are profiting off End of Track, don't want anything like this. And it's just possible that there's a villain behind them all, who's not only behind all of the debauchery at End of Track, but who maybe doesn't want the contract to be fulfilled on a business level for reasons of his own. I wonder who that could be. This was good. It was exactly, I think, what it was made to be when it was a 25-cent paperback 70 years ago. It was exactly what it was meant to be. It was meant to be an hour where you could just forget about everything and just enjoy a story. Just enjoy this story. It wasn't any great writing here. There wasn't. I won't say there wasn't any great pacing. There wasn't any pacing at all. It's incredibly straightforward. Man encounters problem. Man solves problem. Man deals with aftermath of solving problem. No complications at all. The bad guys are thoroughly bad. The good guys are thoroughly good. The Hellraisers are thoroughly Hellraisers. Phil Ward could have been an interesting character if this were 3 times as long and written by someone else. But for all I know, Richard Poole is the name for an author I do know. I didn't detect any stylistic similarities with an author that I've ever read, but there aren't many stylistic notes of any kind in here, so I could have missed them. But anyway, that's your June on the Range report for today. It was West of Devil's Canyon. That's the goal. The title is The Goal. The goal is to get west of Devil's Canyon. The goal is work. It's mercantile. It's not following the herds. It's not fighting the Native Americans. It's not bad guys coming down to town. It's just a guy trying to fulfill a railroad contract, but managed to be a pretty good novel anyway, by an author I don't think I've ever read. So that's it. That's it for today. I will be back down the trail a little bit more with you. I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.